The X-Mid is designed to be very simple to pitch, because the last thing you want to be doing when bad weather is rolling in is fiddling with a complicated tent. The basic concept is as simple as staking out a rectangle, inserting the two poles, and extending them until taut. There's minimal guesswork and nothing to measure. The X-Mid also pitches fly first to keep the inner tent dry, and it's stable throughout the pitch so it's never vulnerable to wind gusts. In more detail, start by throwing out the tent and then staking one of the short sides. Then pull out a third corner at 90 degrees. Try to get that angle nice and square. Once it looks right, stake the last corner where it pulls tight. Now, step back and check that your rectangle is accurate, making adjustments if necessary. An accurate rectangle is key to getting a good pitch, and stepping back gives you the best perspective to assess this. The rectangle should be nice and square and not skewed into a diamond. The second key to a good pitch is having that rectangle tight. So go around the tent and snug it up at each corner before adding the poles. A tight rectangle will limit your poles to the correct height so you can get a good pitch without having to measure them. Otherwise, if the rectangle is loose, the poles will overextend and your tent will get loose sides. This is the number one thing people don't do very well. When you add the poles, you can insert them through the vents or the doors. Either way, the fly will limit the poles to the correct height if you pull that base tight. So here you can see the ends of the tent are tight, and the reason they're tight is because I pulled that base tight before I added the poles. Now for adding the inner tent. You might not have to add the inner tent if you left it inside last time. If your tent is dry when you wake up, you can save hassle next time by packing it up as one piece. However, if the fly is wet from rain on the outside or condensation inside, then it's best to remove the inner to keep it dry. If you need to add the inner, lay it out on the diagonal inside the fly and buckle it to the two peaks and clip it inside the four corners. When you clip the inner tent inside the fly corners, you can clip it either to the grosgrain or the D-rings. The grosgrain is very quick to connect and disconnect, while the D-rings are a bit harder to use but will never accidentally disconnect while you're packing it up. Use the D-rings if you plan to pack the tent in one piece, or the grosgrain if you normally disconnect the two halves. Once you've got the tent up, it's nice to add a stake at any door that you're going to be using to hold that small side of the door in place. When you add a stake at the small side of the door, I like to angle it this way a little bit so that the tent doesn't get loose when you open the door. Normally you shouldn't need to use the peak guy lines, but they are there in case you hit tough weather. If you do want to deploy them, the best way to do it is to angle them a bit towards the door side. That's because the corner here is steeper and so it's not quite as strong. By adding the guy line closer to here, the tent becomes equally strong from all sides. When it comes time to pack up, the first thing to decide is whether you're going to leave the inner tent inside for next time or take it out. I would leave it in if it's dry and it's just going to be that much easier. But if the fly is wet from rain on the outside, or if you cramped in a really wet spot and got condensation on the inside, then it's best to pull the inner out, keep it dry for next time. To remove the inner, the normal method is to go around the tent and unclip it at each corner and at the two peaks. Another option that can be quite nice when it's raining is to pack up the inner while you're inside. From inside, you can lean out one of the mesh doors, unbuckle the peaks, disconnect the four corners, and then roll it up, all while staying out of the rain. Lastly, there's packing up the fly. Here what you want to do is close the vents so that any Velcro from the vents doesn't create holes in the inner tent. And there's actually a nice way to do that. You can take the vent strut, put it horizontal, and stick it to the underside of the top flap so that it stays nicely secure, and it's also going to be horizontal for when you roll up the tent. To pack up the fly, remove the two poles, unstake the base, fold those two fly peaks together, and then fold the whole thing a few more times to form it into a long narrow shape that you can roll up.